Human resources people of Reddit, what are some NSFW or what the heck reasons an employee has been disciplined or terminated for? A guy got fired because it found he was using his work laptop to arrange escorts while traveling for work. Afterwards, they discovered he was keeping a spreadsheet with scores and ranks, and which female employee the escort most looked like. Story 2. We busted someone smoking substances on the job by a cooling tower. We also busted someone having sex in their car with their side piece and didn't answer the radio when we called them. Just fired 2 people for stealing $60,000 worth of copper lines off the lineman truck. Story 3. But I know of someone who was fired after less than 6 months because he kept showing adult film to his colleagues. And when his manager came in and he was doing a substances, he asked him to watch the door so nobody else walked in. Story 4. Back when I was a warehouse manager, I caught 2 employees having sex in an isolated high-bay storage aisle. I immediately proceeded to not give a crap and went on about my day. Another time I caught a member of upper management pilfering product in the same area. Again, I immediately proceeded to not give a crap. And later that week I got promoted. Story 5. Not HR, but had a friend in its security who needed a vent. We worked together for years. Years ago, late 1990, at a large company, there was a team in the basement of the building. I forget their job. Their section was down a long hall of cubicle walls, so they could see if someone was coming to them, and they could prepare. That team requisitioned a server for their work. At the time, servers were expensive, and other teams went without. The systems team replaced their old novel mail server with Exchange. They planned for 5 years of space and thought all was good. At the 6-month point, the Exchange server was nearly full. An audit of account sizes found that this team of 5 were using 70% of the space and company of a several thousand. Adult film. Lots of adult film. They were emailing each other pics and movies, storing them on the server they had. As soon as management knew, they fired the team and locked all their devices in a secure room. My friend's job was to go through all of it, all the workstations, server, and email accounts, creating a spreadsheet of the content. This was per the legal department, to make sure there was nothing illegal there. It took him over a week to get it done, to keep it quiet and tell no one from the company other than the lawyers. Fortunately, there was nothing illegal, just really graphic. After, he was given 2 weeks of vacation to decompress and a therapist if he wanted. How did I know? I was a contractor there at the time. And while he was told to tell no other employees, I was not an employee. I was a friend from another job, and he needed to tell someone other than his wife. So when he was finishing up, he walked by my desk, said, "Let's go to lunch, right now." So I went to lunch and just listened to him vent. Story 6. I used to work in a United Kingdom job center, and we had 2 blokes and a woman all laid off from the same factory on the same day. All were trying to claim unemployment benefit after being dismissed for gross misconduct. It only came to light that these 3 had been caught enjoying a threesome in the works toilets when one of the blokes' wives came into the office on signing on day to the best of my memory, lamp that damn idiot who lost my Trevor his damn job. Trevor's real name is lost in the depths of time. Story 7. I had a guy who, in his first week of employment, was caught pleasure himself to adult film in the parking lot. No effort to be subtle or anything. The company I worked for was so lawsuit adverse that they would never let us fire anyone. In fact, we once had an employee who we found out was coming into work, clocking in, and then going home. They would come back at the end of their shift to clock out. HR wouldn't let us fire this employee without first giving them a warning. Anyway, I hear about this. Check with HR, and as it turns out, pleasure himself in the parking lot is a terminatable offense. So I volunteered to take care of terminating the guy. So I bring the guy into an office to tell him that we're letting him go, and he asks me, "Don't I get a warning?" And I had to tell him, "No, not for this." This was decades ago. Story 8. A man came in to complain to the zoning manager that one of our employees had been sleeping with his wife. The Zim said he was sorry it was happening, but he didn't know why the man brought it to his attention. The man informed him that the 2 were only doing it while they were at work. Now, the employee worked in animal control, and he requested that he be assigned weekend work. The complainant's wife would get all dolled up like she was going shopping, and then go to animal control and duck the dude in between him putting down animals. The employee was smart enough to be arranging these rendezvouses on his work computer, and I was assigned the investigation. I got to review his emails and learned all sorts of things, like that his junk was actually smaller than her husband's, but she still liked it. They also frequently had sex on a swivel chair at the office. The employee was fired, but being a public employer, the chair remained with the city. Story 9. I found a used condom in my office trash can. A few days later, I found another. HR notified both times, so they called building security after the second. My office was added to patrol route. An employee of mine, married woman, late 20, was hosting gentlemen from other departments, 3 that she confessed to, in my office after hours because 1. Her home life was crap. 2. My office was on an inside corridor and had no windows. And 3, she had a key that she'd been given by the previous occupant of that office for legit work reasons. She and her stable of men were all let go, and the company paid a professional cleaning crew to deep clean my office. Didn't matter, I still got the ick in there. Story 10. I live close to a Honda plant. One employee was filming, and this dude on the assembly line pulls out his junk, and the girl next to him gave him about 3 seconds of BJ. They were both fired, and the video was all over internet. Story 11. Har found a bent and burnt spoon with the remainder of substances in the trash of the bathroom right after the new hire walked out of it. When confronted about it, he couldn't even put a sentence together. Was fired immediately. Story 12. I have been both HR and a union rep. The 4 strangest things, 2 NSF and 2 WTF. One I was involved with was an organized effort by several employees to steal chocolate bars from a third-party vendor that used one of our storage rooms. It has since garnered the name the Cadbury Caper. Over 7 employees were terminated, and 2 other investigations were launched because of evidence that came up during that investigation about other separate incidents of theft, one of which was an employee taking clean laundry home, using it at home in their cottage, sheets, towels, washcloths, etc., and then returning the dirty laundry to work, and taking more clean ones home again. The second was a registered nurse who was having secret dirty liaisons with a long-term inpatient. She would take him in his wheelchair on walks and then go into an unused storage room in the basement and get to know each other. The third was an incident where the staff washrooms were being randomly found to have fecal matter strewn on the walls, like finger painting. It happened over several weeks, until we literally had to watch cameras to see who went in and out of those washrooms all day, and have them cleaned after every use to see who was doing it. The fourth was a maintenance person, who was caught watching adult film on his work computer and pleasure himself to it on duty. Just before he was fired, he claimed to have an adult film addiction, which completely shifted the course of the investigation and incident. Story 13. Not HR, but I've seen a few what the heck firings. One was an executive who was tasked with putting together a PowerPoint with a whole room full of engineers and managers. His boss, the coup, told him to assemble the pages and input all of us would be feeding him over the course of the day, and that he would be back at like 4 p.m. to see what he had so far. We all worked like mad all day and sent our stuff over to him. We were all in a huge conference room with laptops. Coup comes back in at the end of the day and says, "Okay, show me what you have," and the guy has nothing. He sat there all day and did nothing, thinking that the coup would actually wait until tomorrow or something. When the coup exploded and asked him WTF, the guy said that he actually had no idea how to do PowerPoint. Turns out, this guy got all the way up to a manager position, and his wife did all his PowerPoints for him at home at night. Dude got fired on the spot. Also saw another C-level exec fired for pilfering autographed sports memorabilia from one of our contracted customers. Dude lost a huge 6-figure salary plus his marriage. Ended up living with his mom again, all for some autographed footballs and crap. A security guard making minimum wage busted him by going on a mission and compiling video evidence. He made a greatest hits tape of the guy stealing stuff, waited until a day when there was a big tour, and physically handed it to the CEO of the company and said, "You need to watch this." Story 14. It was Secret Santa, and he got the lesbian member of staff a molded sex toy of his own junk. Okay, quite a few people going crazy over this one. Firstly, it is a true story. Secondly, no one got fired. The guy who gave the gift to the lesbian member of staff was the owner of the company. The company dynamic was extremely informal. Lots of banter, lots of swearing, crude jokes, etc. It was the company way of kid to be like this. No, it wasn't hell to work in a place like this. It was actually quite refreshing in a weird way. I don't work there anymore, however, I keep in contact with people who still do work there, and shenanigans like this happen pretty much on a monthly basis. Story 15. I was a manager of an office. One of the girls came in on the weekend. She walked in on one of the male colleagues in the office having sex with another woman, and that woman was not his wife. When she complained to me, she was very descriptive and even told me that the office smelled like sex. Haha, the guy was fired and his wife filed for divorce. Lesson to be learned. Don't be cheap and bring your mistress to the office to have sex. Story 16. I was talking to our head of training years ago. I asked him that question. He said once he got a call from the hotel manager where we were holding a training session. The manager had him come into his office. The manager asked, "Are you aware we have security cameras in the stairwells?" He then proceeded to show a video of employees having sex in the stairwell. The training head then paused and said, "So those 3 got fired." Story 17. It guy. Back in the days before decent web filtering, HR asked me to check logs for a reported incident. A user got to work early and was walking past a row of cubicles. Glanced over and saw another early riser checking out some photographs. Was it adult film? Of course it was adult film, but not your regular old hide the salami brand of adult film. It was full-on bestiality. Story 18. Had a guy I was working with who was obviously on something, had been reported to her several times. Boss tried to do him a solid and let him take a cup home to piss in to be substances tested and bring it back. A few days later, overheard the boss telling him that they know he got someone else to pee in the cup. Dude was raging, promising it was his. The boss told him if it was his, he was pregnant, made him take another one in the work bathroom, and he failed for Met. Fired, but he was back a week later. Story 19, not in horror, but I had to do some of the hiring. Firing on the farm when I was farming. Well, one guy we hired seasonally to help out at our farm market got caught a customer's dog in the walk-in cooler. We had to let him go, with the police. Story 20. Not her myself, but I've worked in a large hospital for a long time. Lots of folks in a hospital apparently get very horny. We had a program where teenagers, new high school graduates interested in pursuing pharmacology as a degree, career could come in and train to be pharmacy techs and be exposed to the work and processes involved in the work. One of our female pharmacists in her 40s took it upon herself to deflower one of the new grads, who graduated early and was only 16 during his summer there. Got caught going doggy in the stairwell. It was a bigly deal. Also saw a nurse in his mid-20s get fired for stealing medics. It was a very interesting process because you can't so much substances test for that one. Saw a guy doing his residency get toted out of the hospital medical program when he got caught loudly banging a nurse in a call room. Also saw a nurse get fired for stealing insulin to take home to treat her diabetic ferret. Story 21. I've had to fire a line lead manufacturing because she was sleeping with the first and second shift production leaders. They wanted to fight for her in the middle of the plant when they finally figured it out, and she was egging them on. Story 22. I used to work for a large United Kingdom-based company. Part of the initial training period was a week-long stay in London, which was actually pretty cool because it was all drinks and dinner on the company every night. A young lad from my team was on this training week and got absolutely smashed. They went to get in a cab to move on to the next venue, and the corporate head of HR was climbing into the cab in front of him. She was on the larger side, and this young lad saw a large arise in front of him. And before his brain could engage, he wound up and delivered a full open palm butt slap to the corporate head of HR, and he was gone. Story 23. Recruiter here. A guy came in saying it was time for a fresh challenge, not fully utilized in his present role by employees who lacked his ambition and vision, etc., etc. Turned out he'd just been fired after going out. Getting pissed and returning to the office to watch adult film where the cleaners found him in the morning at his desk with his junk in his hand after falling asleep in the middle of a pleasure himself. Story 24. I worked at a hospital. The director of it was fired for bringing nurses to his office for closed-door meetings. Everyone knew what was going on. Eventually, they gathered testimonials and walked him out. Story 25. Colleague got fired for watching adult film during work on a work computer, which is all normal enough, except he was a high school teacher, and his computer was simulcast to the classroom projector and there were students in the room. He was pissed that the union did nothing deep. Story 26. Chef I worked with once had to fire a guy after he found this dude in the walk-in refrigerator ducking a freshly cooked prime rib. Dude didn't even stop, just looked at Chef and said, "Man, you gotta try this." Restaurants can be damn wild, man. Story 27. Not HR, but there when it happened. Trainee sales rep called the female national sales manager a damn ignorant idiot riding from the airport to training with other reps. Our CEO pulled him out and fired him on the spot. At the follow-up meeting, the sales manager said, "Can you believe he called me that?" I said, "Anyone that knows you are not ignorant." She laughed too. Story 28. I once worked in a seedy dive bar with a homeless guy who was such a pleasant and positive person to be around. One night, he walked in on one of our bartenders cooking substances on a hot plate in the kitchen. He reported the bartender and said he wouldn't want to work with them anymore. The managers fired the homeless guy. Story 29. I had to fire a female general manager for offering services to the neighboring non-affiliated food delivery drivers to execute her store's deliveries. Story 30. Not HR, but worked for a company. Some servers needed to get migrated. They overworked some poor admin a lot, so that one day there was this one server left, which absolutely must not get shut down for reasons. Guy walks in, pulls the plug. Overworked admin grabs a crowbar. Why was this even there? And struck the colleague. The man raised his arm in defense. The arm broke. Admin guy was about to let go when he came in with a lawyer. Yes, the company overworked him too hard. He got a big severance pay, but still had to go. Story 31. Not HR, but my friend works at HR, and he told me that someone his company was pleasure himself off in the warehouse. Not in the toilet behind closed doors. No, in the sub-bathroom, where you can wash your hands, etc. He was fired on the spot. Story 32. I'm not in human resources, but there was a guy at my job that was terminated due to harassing many of the other coworkers and messaging guys and asking them to have sex with his wife, asking dudes for fellatio and getting a bunch of the women in group chats to ask for group sex. Now all this information I just shared. I did not know until 3 months after he got fired. I just thought he left because he didn't like the job anymore. Story 33. Crafting out of the police basic training barracks window just after passing out. I used to be in the Royal Navy. Another Navy guy I knew left to join the police. He aced their basic training, got top recruit for everything. He was very fit, intelligent, and a very high achiever when sober. Basically, he won all the trophies and got to go for a few beers after the pass-out parade. Several hours later, he's wandered, stark naked, and decided it'd be funny to crap out of the top-floor window of the barracks, or whatever the police call it. He totally forgot he wasn't in the Navy anymore, and that sort of thing isn't acceptable. His new colleagues grassed him up, so they discharged him on the spot. Game over. Goodbye, police career. The next day, he walks back into the Armed Forces recruitment office, told them exactly what happened. The recruiter laughed and welcomed him back in like he'd never left. He's an officer now. Story 34. Had to fire a woman for sexual harassment once. Had an anonymous complaint about her, so investigated. For context, she was mid-20 working in a company as a team leader, not in USA. We had a very diverse ethnic mix in the workplace, so it was expected to be aware of and respectful of cultural and religious nuances. In the investigation, it came out she had been asking the Muslim males to go to the shop during the working day to buy her period products as she was experiencing period pain. When they refused, she emailed her entire team letting them know she was having to go home for the day because of them. On staff birthdays, she would get the whole team to put in money to buy presents and would then buy sex toys and make people open them in the office. If people refused to contribute, she would publicly shame them. People stopped showing up to work on their birthday to avoid having to deal with the presents. She circulated a photo of herself riding an exercise bike in the mirror, naked. She was also sleeping with another staff member. I've got other gold stories of stupidity, but this is still the most unique experience that has not been beaten, and was over 10 years ago now. Story 35. I worked with a guy who got fired for showing explicit pics of his ex to PPL on the warehouse floor. Some of these pics might have involved dirty acts as well. Now the guy is playing the great parent gimmick even though he's not allowed to see his oldest. Story 36. Had a guy show up to a factory in a tailored suit, covered in tattoos, grill, dyed dreads. Looked like a crafty rapper. The next day, he got mad at the supervisor because he wasn't paid for his first day of work. It was explained to him thoroughly in orientation that we were paid bi-weekly. He started threatening the supervisor, then got violent, and last I know, he got dragged out of the building, and we were told not to ask about it. He was young too, probably just turned 19 years old. The consensus among staff was that he probably did some more illegitimate work before trying to get a real job for some reason. Story 37. I was locking the doors to my venue when I noticed the restaurant opposite and the lights were still on. They always leave early. Maybe they're doing a stock count. Walk in the next day first thing in the morning and the restaurant is filled with senior management. What the heck happened last night? Well, it turns out the new assistant manager that was in charge of closing, though it was a great idea to take 2 waitresses into the manager's office and have a group sex while smoking in front of the cameras. This guy's GF was also a senior manager in head office, never got to know if she found out or not. But I'm guessing so, as he got sacked and the 2 girls were moved to other stores after saying he used his position to get them to join in. Story 38. I'm not HR, but saw a dude not even last through lunch on his first day. Our department was about 10-ish people. We had a list of each member of the team's cell phone number posted up, which in hindsight was not a good idea. The new hire proceeded to save each female member of the team's numbers and text them creepy charged texts. Stuff like, L, you are so beautiful. I can give you the best full body massage you've ever had. It just escalated from there. The best part, one of the females that new guy texted was close to me and my work buddy that was also my desk neighbor. She came to us and showed us the texts, and her face had, what the heck, all over it. My buddy, feeling protective of our gal pal, grabs her phone and immediately calls the sender's number. Right away, we hear the buzz coming from 2 workstations away. New guy was busted, never even turned around, but his ears were beet red. Yep, gone before lunch. Story 39. Not Har, but a highly praised guy at my work smoked meat in a bathroom and smacked a dude on his bare junk at a urinal. I was walking in to start my shift and they literally were dragging him out by his feet and he was hysterically laughing. Story 40. I represented a company. I got a call one day from a lawyer who represented an employee who was recently fired from the company. The lawyer said the ex-employee wasn't paid his last month's wages and they would sue if they didn't get it immediately. I called my client, the company, to see what was up. He was smoking meth in a company truck, then crashed it into the side of a building. We told him to get gone before we called the cops. Me, the next day, to other attorney, did you client say anything about meth or a truck? Other attorney, he may have mentioned something like that. Me, so you know we're not paying you anything, right? Other attorney, I know. Story 41. Termed an employee for going out to his truck. He stood next to the truck with the door open, took his junk out, got hard, took a photo of it, came back inside, and then showed it to a female employee under the table. He was like 23 years old and she was in her mid-40s and did not put up with anyone's BS either. Har fired him over the phone, but later she told me the earful she got from him was something else. Then there was the girl with an OnlyFans account who decided to try to get some new subscribers by showing off one of the naughty photos she took of herself in a Santa outfit, tied up. Then she got upset because the guys around her kept asking her about her breast and if she did anything else besides of. Like, what did you expect? That became a huge ordeal on so many levels. Oh, can't forget the time the random man came out of the bathroom and did the helicopter. He wasn't not happy when I laughed and told him he's fired. I wasn't his manager and he tried to fight me over it with his pants around his ankles. Dude, get out. Story 42. I used to work with a girl who had been with the company for quite a while and was generally terrible at her job, but my company didn't really fire people unless they really had cause. Well, at one point she started pretending to be pregnant, told everyone in the office. This went on for months. Once she got to the point where she would start to show, she started wearing baggy sweaters to cover her belly. She would still talk about it to everyone who would listen, and for some reason would sometimes flash her bare belly at her coworkers, and it was pretty clear she was not pregnant, but she still forged on. We started asking her pointed questions about it to see how far she was willing to go and lie about it. She had a reputation for telling tall tales in general, like how she was in a relationship with a local pro football player and other outlandish things. So along with the complete lack of evidence of her pregnancy, no one in the office actually believed her. Then she called out of work for a couple days and said she lost a baby, yet still showed up to the office in super tight booty shorts to talk to a coworker out front of the building even though she had called out of her shift. For the men reading this, no one who just gave birth is walking around in booty shorts like nothing happened. She kept calling out, and our manager, Hard, demanded a note from her doctor proving why she was out, and she eventually supplied one, but didn't mention anything about giving birth. It was like for some random, completely unrelated thing that wouldn't require being out for days on end. She was, of course, fired finally. Story 43. Not HR, but was the senior Solaris Unix guy at a company in the 90s. One of the early employees' job was to keep adult film out of the search engine. Think something like Yahoo, Google, Excite. He had manually hard-coded his own adult site for whenever someone searched for it. His main star was his wife. I got to search through his Solaris desktop in the vice president of HR's office with a bunch of lawyers from the parent company all looking over my shoulder. Yes, much adult film was found, mostly of his wife. I also found a plain text file with all his banking info. I was tempted to copy it, but with so many eyes watching, I was concerned they would question what I was typing, so I just skipped over it and never mentioned it. 90 was a wild time. Yep, it was really a cop. Story 44. We had a coworker who got fired because he actually did the blowtorch on a door prank. He got it super hot and called another coworker to come into the room, completely burning a dude's hand. Story 45. I had to fire someone who left a DVD folder, one of the 250-ish ones, full of adult film created using company equipment, DVD burners and label makers, not the adult film itself, in one of our company vans. It was found by a female employee. I recognized his writing, but had to send it through the HR process, who eventually fired him for misuse of company property, the van. One of my best times at work was reading all 250 titles to HR. They asked me to stop after about 3, but I wanted to give them the whole picture. The fired employee and I are friends to this day. Story 46. Funeral director wore a shirt that said, "Crap happens," while cleaning up the funeral home. A grieving family who had a loved one pass away unexpectedly saw it and understandably got upset. Story 47. I was a manager in a unionized hospital in a big city, and one of my direct reports managed the parking garage. We had cashiers at the garage for 3 8-hour shifts. The overnight cashier just barely collected enough money to pay his salary. But we justified having him as an extra layer of security, along with TV cameras and periodic security patrols. One night, the security guard caught the cashier asleep, not just dozing off, but curled up with a pillow. He was put on leave, and then we went through the union process of firing him. The union appealed his case all the way up to me, which is the only time that happened. The hearing was pretty friendly, and I could tell that the union rep thought the guy was an idiot. He stayed fired. Oh, and the elevators all had signs indicating that we monitored them for safety. Didn't stop any of the nurses or doctors from talking about who they were banging. Story 48. I'm not in HAR, but knew the HR manager at a previous job years ago. Young, attractive girl from another country starts working. New to the US, in a popular big city, and is in full party mode. She begins an affair with a very married with children coworker who is much older than her. Asterisk, she is also having an affair with 2 other men in different departments. All married and older. We guessed she had a type. The first affair partner confronts her about the others. She runs to HR claiming harassment from him. She tells HR he is stalking her for no reason, and there had never been any romantic involvement with him. Well, the first affair partner had receipts. Not only cell phone text messages of their affair, but emails using their company's email server of adult content from her to him. The HR manager I was friends with said when they presented the explicit messages and emails and photos, he had never seen blood leave the face of a human so fast. She went from tan-toned to printer paper white in 5 seconds. They both got reprimanded while the investigation continued, but she stopped showing up to work a few days later. He was fired a little while later. Story 49. Not in HR, but we had a crew of people who test drove vehicles we build for. One night, someone brings in a 2-liter Mountain Dew jug filled with alcohol. 4 hours later, they were all out back wasted playing bumper cars with the vehicles. Obviously, they have never stepped back in the building again. Story 50. We hired a service writer for a heavy equipment repair facility. She called in sick for the first day, then basically ghosted us for 3 weeks. Then one day, walked in like nothing happened. Kind of reminded me of the Seinfeld skit where George quits and Jerry suggests he just goes back like nothing happened. She filed a wrongful termination lawsuit afterwards too, which didn't really go anywhere. Story 51. A guy at my place got fired for putting his work truck in a ditch by the side of the road went off his head on drink and substances. He got caught by the police trying to hide the van with branches and stuff like that, haha. Even if he got away with that, the thing had a tracker, so he was screwed the next day regardless. Story 52. Not here, but I was management at the time. I had an employee watching the dirtiest stuff he could find on YouTube while at work. When I confronted him, he denied it. I was in shock. In that moment, the only thing I thought to say was, "You didn't delete your browser history, dude." And he took his last check and left. Story 53. Worked in a county for welfare as a supervisor. New employee didn't like our small little desk in the interview room, so decided to bring in wood and a drill to make an addition to it. That was just a write-up. Couple weeks later, he comes in wearing pajamas because he said he couldn't bend enough to put on pants. Terminated during probation. Didn't help that he smelled like substances after lunch every day. Story 54. I was on a demo call with a dozen IT developers and VPs to purchase a multi-million-dollar software. This was a few years before video calls became a thing, and most of the team was in NYC, but we had a few all over the globe on the call, including me. About 10 minutes into the call, a female voice started moaning. It quickly stopped, but the meeting went dead silent, and someone in NYC chimed in, "If you calling in, please mute yourselves." Mind you, not a single person laughed or acknowledged what the sound was. I kind of thought I imagined since it happened so fast, and no one acknowledged it was adult film. Not more than 5 minutes later, it happened again. But everyone knew what it was, but no one was brave enough to tell the unknown idiot to mute the adult film. I about fell over, and my boss, who sat next to me, had to ask what was going on. At another job, a VP of it was fired for repeatedly printing adult images to the office printer. His secretary accidentally picked it up, and he got canned afterwards. A top-level VP making $500,000 decided he wasn't making enough, so he started expensing his cigarettes. Came to light because after nearly 3 years of doing this, someone asked why he had so many expense reports when he doesn't even travel. I worked at a small business where the owner was an old school. He laughed when people quit and just said they couldn't hack it. Well, he went too far one day, and the staff that quit said, "You know your executive desk you are so proud of. Me and my girlfriend had sex on that this weekend." He walked out, and the owner sat there for a solid 5 minutes in silence, unable to comprehend what just happened. He finally started moving again, only to start dragging the desk into the hall for someone else to clean. Man, I got tons more too. People are dumb and stupid. Story 55. One of our department admins was in an adult film. No problem, and she was an excellent admin. It was an open secret, and people could go to a local purveyor of such films and ask for the company name video, and they'd grab the appropriate film. To this day, I don't know the actual name of the film. Anyway, some bright sparks thought bringing it into the office and showing it in a conference room on the projector was a good idea. They didn't even paper over the conference room windows, a common thing to do when sensitive topics were being discussed, like review level setting by management. Said admin walked by and saw the film playing and instantly knew which one it was. Security was called, and once they had enough security there to escort each member of the viewing party out, they went in, took everyone's badges, walked them to their cubes if needed to get their keys, and walked them out the door. Their cubes were packed up by security later for them to pick up. Story 56. We had a maintenance guy terminated after driving drunk to work. Through 2 roadblocks where he somehow avoided getting pulled over, then started work by getting on a ladder and just sort of swaying there at the top where his colleague eventually found him and reported it. I had to take him for blood tests, which could only get drawn at around noon, and he was still 4 times over the legal limit. Story 57. Nothing major, but had a WTF moment. The temp worker was used substances in his car parked right in front of the building, facing the management's office. This was a manufacturing plant, so being under the influence while operating a heavy machine can do a lot of damage. But idiots don't care, nor do they learn. Story 58. I was project manager doing a remodel. I was 25, while most of the contractors, subs, company employees were in their 40, so I didn't anticipate having too many issues where I'd have to sit people down. Fast forward, and I get notified by one of my colleagues that she was walking past the GC's office and spotted the overnight GC watching adult film on his laptop. This was an older fella who seemed like such a nice guy. I had to bring in all the subcontractors and GCs to a conference room and remind everyone that this was a place of work, that this wasn't their home where they could duck around or watch adult film on their free time. Everyone was like, what the heck? Who's watching adult film? I went in the next night when he wasn't expecting me to drop by, as I was only on site during the day, brought him to my office and told him if that crap ever happened again, I'd be on the phone with his boss and his ass would be off our project. 2 weeks later, I had to fire one of the people we hired to help with the remodel on our end because they thought since part of the building was vacant and being remodeled, there was no issue ducking around back there. Didn't take the extra 2 seconds to look up and notice that every square inch of the building was under video surveillance. And by ducking around, I mean they snuck their wife or friend, whoever it was, through the back door, went into one of the bathrooms and literally ducked. Had to show him the video when he kept pushing back that it wasn't him and someone must be mistaken. Folks, hold your damn urges until you get home. Story 59. Employee kept bringing her family in. They would sit in our break room for hours. We had a small break room, so it would be super awkward, especially when they would come in and change the TV or whatever. It would be the husband and 2 young teenagers. So weird. We reported it all the time, and MGMT knew but didn't seem to want to do anything about it. The employee would say she didn't have childcare. But what the heck, your husband is here? Finally, she got fired when her husband started going with her for med passes. Huge HIPAA violation. Turns out the family were huge hoarders and just didn't want to hang out in their own house. People would even see her sleeping in her car. After she got fired, our unit got infected with bed bugs. I swear they were there the whole time, but we just didn't notice until they left. Very strange family. She also got in trouble for doing hours of overtime every day and coming in on days off. Story 60. Investigating a lab tech who was also a network admin before we got serious about it in security. He was believed to have copied a salary spreadsheet from a company officer's computer and published it as part of a unionization drive. And when I got past his BIOS password, by just pulling his hard drive, I discovered to my horror that he had been running a CP server using his modem from inside our AM building. Powered down, hands off, called HR and supervision and the police. That sick git was fired and arrested. Story 61? Not HR, but I used to be a union rep, and I had to sit through a guy getting fired because he was watching adult film at work. He wanted to fight it, and the union was just like, no. There was CCTV footage of him watching adult film. We weren't wasting our resources on that. Story 62. We'd hired a graphic designer who was young and opted to dress overly hot. More than once, she came in wearing a tight men's dress shirt as a dress with a belt and nothing else. There wasn't a strong dress code, and she wasn't ever explicitly exposing anything. So while she got talked to a few times, she couldn't be let go over it. But after about a month, it became clear that she was sweet-talking several of the male designers into doing her assignments for her because she was underqualified and shirking. So that was grounds enough to let her go for. Similar story at another small company. We'd hired a developer who kept dragging on projects during the day and kept stepping out to take calls with his wife. But all of the stumbling blocks with his code during the day would come back the next day smoothed out and working as intended. It turned out that he wasn't even a developer, but his wife was. And she was cleaning up his code both over the phone and in the evenings. So he got let go within a few weeks. Story 63. Not me, but my wife. She had to fire a semi-driver for rear-ending another car because he was pleasure himself while driving, knowingly with dash cams pointed right at him. Worst part is the union tried to fight her company that he should not be terminated. Story 64? Here are a few stories from the multiple companies I have worked at. 1. A guy was caught watching adult film and pleasure himself at his cubicle. Less banana out, but hands down pants, and yes, a cube farm, so literally no privacy. He was reported multiple times before being actually caught. 2. 2 married directors booking meetings with each other to have sex. Caught by HR during the act. This occurred multiple times with different people and at different levels of the company. 3. A customer service rep that was servicing a customer with BJ and giving them a discount. Both were married, but not to each other. 4. So much adult film on their work computer, in their work desk, and hanging on the walls. If the company's leadership is coming to do a site visit, maybe clean up a little. 5. A WTF moment, crapting and pissing all over the floor of the bathroom for weeks. It was a hard time to find out who it was, but eventually, he was caught. 6. Stealing €6,000 of ready-to-go phone cards. He and she was the only people with keys to the safe and also the only people with money to burn on nights out. Easy to find out. 7. A manager that was being very direct with multiple in-scope staff and not taking no for an answer. 8. Using the company card to buy alcohol multiple times. Being told each time it was unacceptable. The last time was the last time. 9. Pleasure himself during a group Teams meeting. No, you weren't scratching your leg for that long, and we could clearly see you end. Story 65. I was told a story by our lawyers of a man who, when he thought that as everyone had gone home, he was safe, was caught on CCTV putting on a gas mask and lowering himself onto a large rubber sex toy at a petrochemicals company in Saudi Arabia. Story 66. Things over the years. 1. Would go through people's desk after hours to steal snacks. 2. Siphoned $300,000 via fake invoices to a shell company they made. 3. At a conference. Got drunk. Asked a peer associate to show him her tits at a charity event at the event. 4. Someone who basically disappeared. 5. Told a manager that if he knew she was gay, he would have never hired her. E6. Told a staffer she talked like an ignorant woman. 7. Was authorizing expenses at 20 times her authorized amounts. 8. Caught smoking in the bathroom. 9. Caught bribing an elected official. 10. Took bribes from vendors. Could go on and on. Story is 67. I'm not her, but once I was on a business trip with a couple of colleagues and I got a call from my boss telling me I needed to fire Ed immediately and send him home. Apparently, he tried to buy substances off a client. They got upset and called corporate. I asked him why he thought our business client sold substances. He just said they looked like guys who would have substances. Obviously, they did not. Helped him pack his things, tossed him on a Greyhound, never saw him again. Story 68. Not an HR person, but one girl was fired from my first job in sales for allegedly smearing crap all over the women's bathroom. It was a big scandal. There was a huge investigation that included a female bathroom monitor to sleuth out who the phantom pooper was. Another girl was fired on her first day for being on Met, allegedly. She came in wearing gloves in the summer and looked super lost and joined a random meeting instead of her onboarding session. It was a fun job. Story 69. Not in hair, but I had to fire someone for throwing a stapler in anger at another employee. This was after the person was warned not to throw things. I had backups stand outside the office door in case of more abuse. Story 70. Worked for a multinational company in the US. HR sent a female staffer around to the different sites to talk about harassment. What to do if you're involved. She was young, good-looking, and well-proportioned. She was let go for harassing her male coworkers. Story 71. I worked at a job that threatened to fire me. One of the other workers snuck into the women lockers, change room, and filmed one of the girls changing. He then went and showed everyone at work the video. The girl he filmed was a friend of mine, so I went straight to her rather than HR. The bosses did nothing because the pervert was one of the boys. My friend filed a police report and threatened to take the workplace to court. The boss said if I was to testify in court that I would be fired, so I quit that day. Story 72. Recently, I had to manage a write-up for an employee who smoked in a non-smoking zone. Big kicker was that it was in a dust-filled area. Those two together create massive explosions, like massive, less than 10 a year approximately. First time was a just in case he didn't know. Second time was because it was the day after. Courts like to see 3 warnings before termination, FYI, even if it is a major safety infraction. The third was because while on a tour with new employees, he told the temps that they'll hate it here. What the heck? Who says that, my dude? So I moved the notion to terminate him. 2. Warning gross. Weirdest one was a person who smeared feces and hid it everywhere in the bathroom. 2 separate bathrooms behind signs, on handles, on the mirror, in the faucet. Tried to offer Ada to whoever came clean. They didn't, so it became a different matter. We found him, wrote him up, he continued. Terminated. Months after we kept smelling crap. Turns out he shoved it deep in the hand dryer. That was a bad experience. Story 73. Coworker, a contractor, fired for using government-issued credit card to be used for official travel only for personal household expenses. Odd turn, coworker was so well liked by government customer that he was rehired by a different company who worked on same contract. Story 74. I used to work at a Walmart distribution center, and we had a bunch of people get fired for dealing substances at work. Apparently, they had an elaborate system set up to move the substances around the warehouse that even involved announcing it over the loudspeaker and code. My boss was arrested for stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of electronics by just loading pallets of merchandise into his truck in the middle of the night. The security guard who helped him was also fired. Arrested. Story 75. I worked at a very large warehouse, and it had an open floor between you walking and a few different types of forklifts rolling around. Well, 2 people on our second shift got the bright idea to get on a special lift that the forks had free movement and could stow pallets in tall racks on the left or right side. They took these to the back in a dark section in one of the lanes, raised it to the max height, 60 feet, interlocked the forks, and got busy. They got caught mid-act. Both were married with kids, both got fired on the spot. It was such a hot topic that they had to start telling people to stop talking about it during morning stand-up. Story 76. Not in Hodger, but when I worked at a really nice restaurant, the sous chef that had been there for years did a whippet during service and lost all inhibitions for a few moments. Pissed right in the trash can in the open kitchen, viewable to staff and guests. Fired on the spot, hilariously. Story 77. Worked for a wireless company, and while installing an antenna on a rooftop of a 20-story building, one of the guys decided to take a break to piss. He did so on top of the roof. Also, this was not the tallest building around, so there were plenty of people who looked out their office windows and saw this man junk out, pissing onto the roof of a building. We know people saw it because the building was getting complaints calls. He didn't last long with the company. Story 78. We had a nurse have a nervous breakdown in a patient's room. The patient hit their call bell because they were freaked out, and when the nurse's aide went to answer it, they found her curled up on the floor crying. Story 79. My mate was caught drinking on the job. The manager was off, but the supervisor sent him home and told him to report to the manager's office at 9 a.m. the next morning. He went in at 8:30 a.m., poured something on the workshop floor, lay down in it, and started screaming. Taken to hospital in an ambulance. Off sick for a year on full pay before they finally sacked him. Story 80. Not hard, but when I was chefing, I got my roommate a job as a bar back and server. 1 month later, he comes walking around the corner with the biggest crap-eating grin, looks at me and says, "My name, I'll see you at home. Just got caught ducking Nicole." Also, fake name. I laughed and said for sure. Little did I know that they were ducking on my dry storage area, specifically on a case of Idaho potatoes. Was quite the laugh when I called my food rep and explained to him why I would need to return these potatoes. He didn't take the potatoes back, but like a very nice guy, and since I made him laugh, he comped me a case of potatoes. Story 81. Not in HR, but someone I worked with got fired once because he fingered a client at a work event, and it was pretty damn obvious what was happening. Same guy had previously been warned about his conduct and professionalism after he offered to sell Seek to a senior colleague. Advertising in the naughties was pretty wild. Story 82. Not Har, but an et guy who had to work with Har after I found homemade adult film of a guy and his wife on his work laptop. Several years ago, I was using the Windows Easy Transfer tool to get this guy's old laptop data onto his new machine. The tool errored out, saying the file path was too long for certain folders. Files? Figured, whatever, I'll just transfer them manually. Navigated to the folder where he had the videos and pictures hidden dozens folders deep, and had the extra large icons showing, ended up calling my boss over. We immediately took the laptop to a conference room with HR and his boss to explain the situation. He was walked out later that week. Story 83. Not HR. But I knew a VP that paid a low-level staffer with limited English to not wear a bra. She was a native Swedish speaker, who happened to fortunately meet the only other Swedish speaker I had ever met. The poor girl told the other woman what was going on, and that she felt that he would have fired her if he did not do as he requested. He was fired that day. Story 84. Not technically HR, but HR adjacent. Substances in the bathroom, a true classic. Ducking a coworker, consensual, but they wouldn't stop emailing nudes on company dime and email server. Running over a coworker in a mad spree out of the company parking lot. Yes, injury was involved. An empty Jack Daniels bottle disposed of in the bathroom. Enough video evidence to link it to him. Not enough that they terminated him that day, but enough that questions were raised. Yeah, it was almost certainly him, but they couldn't prove without a shadow of a doubt that it was him, so let it go. Story 85. Not in HR, but the music teacher at my middle school got fired on his day off. He was on long-term leave after breaking his leg, and his daughter was his substitute. One afternoon, she decided to show the class the video from the winter concert. The music teacher had filmed it. A few minutes into the concert, the camera started zooming in on the girls' chests. Understandably, the students went nuts. The substitute, the guy's daughter, remember, lost it and shut off the video before she ran crying from the room. My sister was on the video, but was not highlighted. My parents were asked if they wanted to press charges. They didn't, but several other parents did. Story 86. My wife is a recruiter. The one that takes the cake is she placed someone at a job who was found pleasure himself in a closet by a cleaning lady. His response when he was caught was, "You want some of this?" It was a law firm. I personally experienced 2 cases of adult film addiction. One was a guy in another department who would ask female co-workers what they thought about the adult film he was openly watching at his desk. Government employee, reprimanded. The other was a Madison AV, advertising executive who was not fired for the literal stacks of company asset hard drives he had filled with adult film, but the fact that he had stopped working months ago to fill them. He did get divorced over the adult film, though. Story 87. But at my last job, a guy got fired for using his work email to run his illegal brothel instead of just making a separate Gmail or whatever. I think it was the IT department who discovered it somehow and raised the alarm. After he got fired, he kept trying to solicit male coworkers to use the brothel by texting them over and over, offering them discounts. All jokes aside, it actually highly irritated almost all of them, as they had girlfriends and wives and didn't want that stuff sent to them. Story 88. Not HR, but worked for a video game developer who previously had a team member, torrenting pirates films from the office, pleasure himself in the office, sleeping in the office, leaving fecal matter on the windowsill in the office, and dumping litter from his car onto the office car park floor of the office without ever being fired, spoken to about it. Think they were a V-small team at the time and no on-site HR managers up to tackling it. He eventually left. Story 89. Not-in-here chick got let go for taking pictures and posting them to her of in the back room of the store. An ex-friend had reported her of page to the company. I also had to discipline an employee for making out with his girlfriend over the counter while the store was open. It was a small store. I basically was like, dude, what the heck were you thinking? You're lucky a family didn't walk TF in. Story 90. Schlumping a subordinate and promoting him to a position he was seriously unqualified for. I actually didn't fire her myself. I forced her to fire him, and she wound up quitting a month later after the relationship imploded, sharing adult film with a coworker on a company email server, and accidentally forwarding it to the company's internal mailing list. 2 coworkers were fooling around in a testing lab. The devices being tested were cameras, and the tests required periodically saving footage. Story 91. Oh man. When I was 18 years old, I worked in an office of a small company. I had to get into a coworker's computer to get some pictures of a house for our client. I didn't know where she'd saved them. There was a folder on her desktop that was just new folder. So I opened it up. Pictures of my coworker in a diaper. Like a dozen pictures or something of this mid-50 lady in a diaper. The most, what the heck, moment of my young life. Story 92. Years back, I managed a small security company for a while. We had a construction site that had a hotspot set up for our reports and emails, but they warned us that the bandwidth was limited, and it was only for reports and emails. So his first night out there, one guard hooked up the hotspot and watched adult film until he was 800 gigs over their limit. I remember because it was $1 a gig past the limit, and we had to pay them $800. Dude was flabbergasted that he was being fired just for ignoring rules and pleasure himself all night instead of doing his job. Story 93. Not in horror, but I had a good friend that worked for a call center. And this chick she worked with had sex multiple times in the building's stairwell with 2 different people within the first 3 months of her working there. Someone recorded her in the act at one point, and it got sent around. She and the people she hooked up with were fired when HR saw it. Story 94. Not HR, but work in manufacturing. Last year, we had one guy, 13-year employee, about 50 years old, get fired for saying his sister passed, called into HR, and the sister was there telling them she didn't pass. She didn't work there. While also last year, a girl in her late 20s was caught naked by herself in the men's room stall with her clothes outside the door, calling for guys to come in. Lamau. What a morning. Story 95. A guy got fired for watch adult film. Come on, man, you knew everything was monitored. Funniest part about it was that he was a holy roller, always preaching at coworkers. He was my waiter at Carrabba's a few months later. Story 96. Not HR, but a woman that worked with me had a dozen of swinging apps on her phone. Every time she would show an app to a client, she browsed through those briefly, like flashing their existence. When she was disciplined for it, she said, "You can't shame me if you know what these apps are about." Story 97. I'm not horror, but I was directly outside the office when discipline was handed out. One of the managers of the company I was working for was going through a real tough divorce. I believe kids were involved and all that, so child support had to be handled. A lot of stress. So anyway, he was at a vendor's site and they had left him in a meeting room and he was masturbating the whole time after they had left. One of the ladies of the executive board walked in on him, full frontal. Needless to say, he was dealt with in less than an hour and it was a hectic day at work. Story 98. A woman who worked in a department close to mine was fired for stealing chicken wings. In the cafeteria, she was loading up on wings and one of the kitchen staff noticed she was loading up a lot. They mentioned there was a limit of, I want to say 10. She kept grabbing more, then ran out of the cafeteria. Security followed as far as they could, and the cameras had her going to the bathroom. I was told she hid for a while, then left. The chicken wings were thrown out in the bathroom, and she left for the day. Comes back the next day like nothing happened, and was promptly escorted out. Story 99. Worked hard and had plenty of head-shaking reasons I got to fire people. The one that I still think about was this older white guy telling an offensive joke about Native Americans to 2 young Native American women. They told him his joke was not funny, but instead of saying sorry or trying to backtrack, he decided to double down and told them, "No, I don't think you understood the joke," and repeated the joke. Needless to say, he ended up in my office being given his walking papers. Story 100. Not horror, but our testing division hired a new guy, and one of our longtime employees was taking a dump in the toilet. New guy must have not seen the boots under the stall. New guy starts to watch adult film at the unseen aisle loud enough for the guy taking the dump to hear. It gets worse. He started to pleasure himself at the damn urinal. Our guy was frozen and mortified because he has to listen the entire time. Dude flushes the toilet and walks out. New guy was fired the same day. Talk about completely unhinged. The urinal? Damn, bro. Story 101. I got a 7-day suspension for saying damn. Not even in a rude way, just as an adjective in construction. I was in the role of superintendent, and the person I said it to had interacted with me a ton, and we had a personal rapport. Site manager wanted to give me a verbal write-up just to make it go away. Director agreed that it was dumb. V decides I need 7 days suspension. 7 days off for that one. Joke's on them, don't tempt me with a good time. I still say damn. Story 102. I worked at a dog daycare, and the one other kennel acid was a former stripper who offered some owners a special service out back behind one of the buildings. It was a fairly upper-middle-class doggy daycare, so it was quite shocking. I believe the young lady went back to her other job after being fired. I also believe a client or two didn't return after she was fired. Human resource people have read it. What's the most ducked-up story of an ex-employee that caused their termination? And how awkward was the conversation? Story 1. We never had to actually fire him. He went to jail and we never heard from him again. But the police once arrived at our office and told us one of our drivers was robbing banks and using our truck as his getaway vehicle. It was apparently really effective because he'd cover his company's shirt, rob the bank, then uncover it and jump in the truck. Nobody looks twice at truck drivers in uniform. He got away with like 10 heists before he got caught. Story 2. I was a manager at an ice cream shop. So yeah, also HR. We open at 11, and my opener is supposed to be in at 10. I get in at around 10:45 to help finish opening, count the safe, etc. This sweet gal was my regular weekday opener and got her crap done quickly. I was a bit shocked one day when I came in and nothing was ready, but our stereo in the back of the shop was on. I go to the back and there's nobody in the back, and I'm very confused. So I start doing the opening duties myself. As songs are transitioning, I hear thudding in the walk in freezer. I open the door and she and her, who I assume is her, boyfriend are going at it. I close the door, trying not to laugh, and just wait for them to eventually come out. She sheepishly saunters out with him and just says, I quit. I laugh, take her keys, call someone else in, and go on with my day. She used me as a reference for her next job, and I put in a good word. People duck up from time to time. Story 3. Guy that was hired was liked by us and our client. They interviewed him and loved him. Nice older gentleman. One day, Bill doesn't show to work. Okay, it happens. Next day, Bill doesn't show. Seems uncharacteristic of him. Give him a call, no answer. Next day, a no-show. Now it's job abandonment. Give him a call, no dice. Day 4, a no-show. We're going to have to talk if he shows back up. That night, I get a call from one of my employees. Turn it on 11. Well, Bill went out to a bar, picked up a girl, took her home, and kept in bed. 3 days later, she was found running naked down Conroe, 105 at 3:30 a.m. Needless to say, I didn't have to discuss his job abandonment with him. Story 4. Not in HR, but in it. We had a computer operator who worked the weekend night shift. His responsibility was to submit jobs on the mainframe and break down the reports and distribute them, though many emailed automatically. One Sunday, the head of payroll did not have the report she normally had every week after specific programs ran against the HR system. She called into the operations center and there was no answer. Repeated calls yielded the same result, so she called the operations supervisor. He attempted to check the security camera that was in the room, but the camera had been turned away facing a wall and had been software locked, so it could not be rotated. He tried the operator's cell phone and did not reach him. So he went into work, and when he arrived, the windows on the doors to the operations center had been papered over. He opened the door and found the operator hanging completely naked dead in front of a laptop full of adult film. Apparently, he spent his downtime on the weekends autoerotic, asphyxiating himself with a cord wrapped around the attic trusses. I guess this time he pushed it a little bit too far and ended up terminating himself. Really not a good scene around here in the weeks, months that followed. Obviously, it's still talked about every so often. Story 5. Not horror, but I sat in on the meeting to witness for them. Call center work. A woman had a personal call pulled by our client and it got out of hand. They pulled the call because she didn't go into personal call model, which would cause them to ignore it. Basically, she called her side dude, and as they were on the phone talking about all sorts of damn, including some in her car in the parking lot at work, her boyfriend showed up at the dude's house and was screaming bloody murder through the door, threatening to hit him. Side piece didn't know he was side piece. And she just started freaking out and crying a bunch, both on the call and in the meeting. She declined even to get her personal effects from her desk out of embarrassment and just left very quickly. Story 6. We had a 20-something kid lie about his 3-year-old son pass a week or so after we hired him. He missed work for doctor's appointments and then the funeral, etc. He cried, understandably, after his son pass. Our office manager didn't buy it, though. Through a lot of digging, she could find no death record, no obituary, no funeral home in the area to send flowers to. She found the boy's doctor, though. And they called the mom and confirmed the boy was just fine. We confronted him, and he said he was an addict and was detoxing. Really shook up the whole shop because most of us have kids, and he was living every parent's nightmare. Story 7. Just mentioned this on another sub. I hired a convicted offender to work at a seasonal Halloween store. Turns out the guy had 243 convictions for and creation or design of obscene material. His ex-wife called the HR Anonymous report line and informed them we'd hired a pedo. The official cause of termination? Since he failed to disclose his felony status, he was let go for lying on his job application. Story 8. Was forced to hire a crazy person due to a new policy. If people were on layoff lists elsewhere, you had to hire them. She even failed the interview. The correct answer to how to calm down an irate customer is not berate them publicly, because that calms people down. I looked like an idiot to staff because, of course, I had to pretend this was a great hire because A, it's not fair to prejudice people, and B, in the eventual firing paperwork, I can't do anything wrong. Highlights of the person's crazy. Said, I don't have to listen to you. To employee training her on the very first day. Had both the ups driver and copy machine repair people, lovely, kind people, in my office with red faces saying they wouldn't return if she was at the reception desk. Refused to let legitimate people into the office, yet escorted people into the back cashier area after hours. She stalked my boss home on public transport. She failed a filing assignment with a 50% error rate. Every single day, I had an employee in my office saying that she had said something insulting or weird to them. Again, they thought I was crazy because I'd listened to the complaint, then tell them that I expected everyone to behave professionally and there should be no retaliation. Her excuse for one exchange, she's from a different island in the Philippines. Me, inwardly rolling my eyes. Well, here at this office, we treat everyone with respect and professionalism, no matter the differences in gender, ethnicity, country of origin, or island in the Philippines. HR made us keep her for 4 months before agreeing to fire her. Story 9. Not working in HR, but my father told me about a few cases. One day, a guy got caught on camera, damn his coworker in the giant desk of the secured meeting room, for sensitive talk. Not only was the guy not supposed to do that at work, but also, he wasn't supposed to have any access to that area. Also, his wife was working here too. Yes, they broke up, and yes, he got fired. Also once, a woman from the night cleaning team came to my father in order to complain about an employee who was refusing to pay her for her services. She was basically doing prostitution at work during nighttime. After they found the tapes, the dude got called, asked to pay her, then they both got fired. Story 10. Currently working as a recruiter for a staffing company. This morning, a guy we hired yesterday for an entry carpentry position at $18 per hour called me to let me know he wasn't coming to work Monday unless we increased his pay to $40 per hour. I wished him luck with his job search. Story 11. Not HR, but security at the time. Police came in and asked about an employee. He was there. An entire SWAT team went in after him. He managed to get away. He killed and wife and daughter 3 days before and continued coming to work like nothing happened. Story 12. Not HR, but we had an incident at the sub shop I used to work at. One employee, let's call him Mark, left the front line during the dinner rush to go clean the bathroom. Conveniently, the girl he had been seeing went into the woman's restroom just as he came round with his cleaning supplies, and then also entered the woman's restroom. It's a single-person bathroom. The store has surveillance cameras, so when the closing shift leader complained about him dipping during a rush, it was just a matter of skimming the footage. He was in there with the girl for over 20 minutes before she was seen coming out adjusting her pants. Once word got around to the manager, owner of the store, it was another few days before Mark came into work and got his ass fired. Manager called him into the back where he watches the cameras, saying, I have this movie I want to show you. I think you'll like it. You star in it. The best part about this is before anyone really found out, Mark had gotten a promotion. The timeline was essentially as follows. Saturday, he ducked a girl in the bathroom. Saturday, he got promoted. Sunday, the manager found out. And Monday, he was fired. Story 13. Not hard, but when I was a teenager, I worked at a Dairy Queen. A middle-aged woman who lived on the same street as me started working with us. She was working grill and purposely making mistakes on orders with special request burgers, like ketchup only or no mustard, because she knew they'd ask for a new one. She was pocketing the burgers to feed to her dogs because she said she couldn't afford dog food. She only worked there for about 2 weeks before getting caught. Story 14. Some dude was caught crap on the side of the building. By the time he was found out, he had amassed quite a huge pile back behind the weld shop. When I asked him why he was crafting there, he was like, I don't know, we do it back home. New guy stopped showing up for work. Like 3 says later, he busts in the front door, very sunburnt. Apparently him and his buddy decided to get ducked up on a boat and got washed out to sea. They drifted around for a few days until a container vessel saw them in their Little John boat. Story 15. Not in HR, but have a great example from my last job. I worked for a smaller family-run company with only about 12 office employees. The company was run by a husband and wife, and pretty much everyone employed worked there, because we knew the family in some capacity outside of work, which led to employment. There was one woman in particular who had been there 15 years, and no one really knew why she was still there. She messed up all the time, forgot to follow through on pretty important work tasks, frequently arrived late, and had a habit of smoking on her lunch breaks in the parking lot. She would even steal from work. We had conference rooms on site stocked with snacks and sodas for our clients, and she would help herself to these things on an almost daily basis. In the course of her working there, she got married. And I remember her even using our work postage machine to post all of her wedding invitations. Just one of those total mooch type of people who any good boss would at least talk to, probably terminate. So years go by, and while others are reprimanded for little things because the wife owner was a total idiot for rules, this woman continues to get raises and stay employed. No one knows why until one day she lets it slip that she's been banging the boss for the better part of 10 years. Starts showing supposed junk pics of our boss on her phone to others in her department. Claims she and the boss had sex after hours on a conference room table, and that as part of the arrangement, he basically turns a blind eye to her terrible behavior during work hours. What she didn't count on was her department coworkers being tired of picking up her slack while she got off, literally, with no consequences. Someone in her department ended up letting details of the affair slip to our HR person, who had to then take it to the bosses. She was fired by the end of that same day. The boss still runs the company to this day, with zero repercussions. He insists she made the whole thing up. Also worth noting, his wife is the mistress from his first marriage, and current wife looks remarkably like the terminated employee. Story 16. I wasn't in HR, but I was supposed to be interviewing a guy for an IT job and was just going to the conference room to start when the HR recruiter came to my desk and said, "You won't be interviewing some guy today." It wasn't uncommon for people to have to cancel, so I asked, "Are we rescheduling him for another day?" And she looked like she was going to bust if she didn't let it out, closed my office door, and said, "He was damn hitting on me when I was going through his application paperwork." The guy actually hit on the HR rep at a job interview, and not just, "You look very nice," but asked for her phone number, refused to take no for an answer, and eventually said, "I'm not leaving this room without your number," and she called security to escort him out. She was a very attractive woman, so maybe the guy thought taking the long shot was worth losing the job over, but I suspect he was just stupid. Story 17. Obligatory not HR, but I have one. Worked at trendy ad agency that worked with a lot of beverage brands. We had a table in the corner with coffee, tea, etc., as well as several bottles of hard alcohol from clients normally used for Friday afternoon drinks. At 9 a.m. on a Monday, the brand new hire, who came highly recommended by the CEO, arrives for their first day of work. He is, of course, invited to join our traditional 10 a.m. Monday all-staff, where we discuss that week's projects, etc. By the time he walks in the room at 10:02, he's looking a little odd. He's also drinking out of one of those massive thermoses. By 10:10, people are sending, "Is it just me?" or messages to one another. At 10:20, he stumbles out of the room, literally holding onto walls, and an employee wordlessly gets up, follows him out. We pretend not to hear him shouting at this employee about how he's not drunk. He was never seen again, and I've heard that agency is much more uptight about drinking on the premises now. Story 18. Site manager at a warehouse with plus 800 employees, sower by default. Female custodian comes into my office, stating she caught a male employee masturbating in the restroom. I asked how she knew, and she said she was trying to clean, so she called out janitors and got no reply. So when she walked into the restroom, she heard groaning, saw multiple wads of toilet tissue on the floor, and she could smell it. I asked her if she knew who it was, and she said she didn't know the name, but she'd know the face because he bumped into her as he was leaving and she was waiting to clean. She gives me a description of the stroker. I have her write a statement, and I tell her that based on her statement, I think I know who it is, but I need her to verify. I tell her we will walk through an area, and if she sees him, that she's not to say a word, but to simply keep walking and tap my shoulder. We leave the office, walk through storage racks, and sure as crap, she stops, points directly at him and says, "That's the sick git right there." He sees and hears us but doesn't react, so my gut says maybe she's wrong. Plus now I have to reprimand her for using foul language. I call my director just to keep her in the loop as, she says, "Fire him immediately." I reply with, "We can't prove he was, but even if she is willing to say she peeked through the stall door and witnessed him pleasure himself, I still can't. Because he has a reasonable right to privacy in the restroom, but I can call the police on her for peeping at him and let the chips fall where they may." Again, my boss says fire him right now. And I say as soon as she sends me an email stating he's to be terminated and the reason that it'll be taken care of. My boss gets with risk management and does a 180. I now have to write him up for making a mess in the restroom and for spending too much time taking a crap. I fire back with, "I'm bringing him in the office to tell him to be aware of his time of the floor, and in the future, if it affects his performance, he may be disciplined." After having told the custodian that she isn't to tell anyone about this incident until it's been thoroughly investigated, she promptly spends the next several hours telling everyone she can that she caught Isaac beating off in the men's room. I track her down twice and warn her to stop telling the story and get back to work too. No avail. She already had several write-ups for taking too many breaks, poor attendance, and punctuality. I had several employees corroborate the story and timing, along with surveillance footage. They write statements and I walk her out for insubordination and stealing company time. Never a dull moment. Story 19. Ooh. Not in HR, but have a juicy one. One of the devs got hired and we found out he had a lawyer, GFA. He then broke up with her to bang a newish sales lady. They were caught multiple times doing it around the office. Then he decides he is done with her and gets back with the lawyer, GF. Sales chick loses her crap, and a big screaming match ensues in the office in the middle of the day, throwing crap at one another. Both get fired as a result. Lawyer GF decides to sue the company because her BF got fired. Lawsuit includes all the gory details, including sexts between sales lady and dude being read out as evidence. Story 20. Work in an electronics factory. One of the engineers noticed the toilet stalls seemed to be vibrating. He knocked on the door and got no response, so summoned a first aider, fearing someone was having a heart attack in the toilets. The first aider climbed on the neighboring toilet to look over the barrier and looked down on an employee pleasure himself to his iPad with headphones in both ears. Dude got a warning, got caught doing the same thing again later in the week, fired. His wife still works at our company. Story 21. Not HR specifically, but I ended up playing a role in the hiring and firing. A guy who had been hired before I got this little promotion was a terrible employee. We all hated working with him, despite the fact that he seemed like an okay guy personally. My boss hired him, and although he had plenty of reasons to fire him or terminate his trial period employment, he never did. 6 months into his employment, my boss realized this guy's car had been in the parking lot all day and night for weeks. He asked me to look into it, and I found that this guy got a do-I. And after getting his car back, he had it parked in the employee parking lot, and then stole a company car which he had been using despite not having a valid license while awaiting trial. While doing this investigation, I was able to look through his records and found that his application and resume were absolutely ridiculous. They looked like an elementary school kid filled them out. There's no reason for this guy to have ever been hired. Turns out, I discovered my boss only hired him because he wanted to get closer to the guy's female friend. Story 22. Not human resource. I'm a supervisor at a landscaping company. I hired a woman in her early 40s because she seemed like a good hire, experience and whatnot. A month went by without any issues. That was until a good employee of mine up and quit without any reason. When I met him to give him his last check, he showed me text message after text message of that woman sending dirty text messages without him responding. This created problems for that employee and his wife. So she gave him an ultimatum, her or the job, so he quit. After doing a little digging, I found out he was not the only one. She would send text, Facebook messages to half the company. Also, I found out she ended up making a deal with another employee that if she do BJ him, he would mow the yard by himself. I read off every text message that I saw via print-off transcripts and asked if she actually sent those. She admitted to everything, even the BJ incident. Both employees were obviously fired. Hope the head was worth it. Story 23. Not horror, of course. Used to work at a manufacturer that ran. It eventually came out that a couple people on second and third shift during their lunch breaks were regularly escort themselves out in the parking lot in exchange for substances that they would then consume before going back to work. It would explain why second and third shift made twice as much scrap product as first shift, as well as why they couldn't be trusted with special builds. They'd typically ruin things out of neglect. Story 24. Not HR, but at the software company I worked for 20 years ago, there was this guy who seemed normal and then completely went bat crap through insane emails and phone calls to my friend who worked in HR. I can't remember the content, but they were delusional. Like he thought he was the reincarnation of some saint, and it was his mission to save her. They finally got rid of him, but she was scared he was going to come after her for a while, because he kept trying to contact her even after he left. I remember they had to beef up security and get someone to walk her to her car and back. Story 25. I heard this story earlier this year from a friend still working for a former employer of mine. This was an IT-managed services company that employed help desk techs, field techs, and also had telecom and fire, burglary systems divisions. Really segmented, fairly large. But it wasn't a bad place to work. One of the field techs was a bit of a character. He moonlighted as a private investigator and repo man. And there was at least one occasion during my time there that he disappeared for a few days. We later found out he was arrested and in jail as a result of his other profession, but he continued to work there after that incident. Anyway, there was always a fair amount of infighting between the techs and managers, and apparently there was some real hatred between this particular field tech and his dispatcher, manager. The tech had decided to quit, but decided that he wanted to scorch the earth on his way out. He utilized his resources as a pie to dig up dirt on the manager and fired off an email to the entire company on his last day with an attachment, scumbag.pdf. Apparently, the manager in question was a truly horrible person with a fairly extensive criminal record. He was actually a registered offender in a couple of states. So the revelation was a bombshell for the rest of the company. He was one of the top 5 managers in the company, basically leading his division, and had been there for something like 15 years. They canned his ass, but then had to deal with the fallout from all of the other tenured employees. Imagine the feeling of betrayal when it's revealed that you have been working closely with, socializing, and attending company picnics, events, etc., with a greasy pedo. If you had worked there any length of time, this man had met your family and your kids. I hear they'll be performing background checks from now on. Story 26. I worked for a retail chain in their corporate offices many years ago. We had an employee that seemed great on paper and aced her interview. We were all patting ourselves on the back at how awesome of a hire this was. Her first project with the team was a trip with me to visit some of our distribution centers in the Northeast US. We went there and did our thing. Everything seemed fine. After a few days on the road, we went back to the office. We decided that I would write up our reports for the first 3 places we visited, and she would do the other 3. Simple, easy distribution of labor. A few days go by and the director of our department asked me where our work was. I said that I'd done my part and they were in the system. She was doing the other half. Another few days, another question. I asked her about it each time and got, "I'm working on it. Have it in tomorrow both times." Apparently, she had never used Excel. It was a very simple and not complicated at all spreadsheet. No functions or tricks or anything, and was trying to cover it up. Every night she would tell our director that she's crap at the job and he should just fire her. He tried talking her down. After nearly 2 weeks of this stuff, she finally uttered the magic words that he could work with. I should just quit. His lightning-quick response was, "I accept your resignation effective immediately," and she left. She came in the next day like nothing ever happened. And when he saw her, he said, "What are you doing here? You quit last night, and I accepted." She tried to backtrack it, but he'd had enough. He told her to leave. She refused. Eventually, he had to call security, who handcuffed her to her office chair, rolled her into the elevator, then rolled her right out of the building. That was the last we ever heard of her. Story 27. Oh man, I used to work a job that exposed me to lots of these. I could literally tell these stories all day. Even though it isn't particularly saucy or anything, this one has always been my favorite. The employee was terminated from the job for siphoning gasoline out of his boss's car with an electric vacuum, which ignited the gas and burned the car to the ground. It's like a Coen Brothers movie, but real. Story 28. I'm an HR guy for the last 8 years. Public sector. Seen some weird crap. Senior employee who's been dead weight in the company for a long time. Union steward. Once a deliverable comes in, he'll get a doctor to write a note on something with a prescribed recommendation for time to be away. We honor it. He doesn't come back. We send multiple paperwork to the doctors to ask for clarification on information to accommodate. They don't answer. He eventually comes back when there's a threat of job abandonment, and then issues a new doctor note and does the same game. He's been doing this for over 7 years. Executive director tells this guy's manager that enough is enough. We set up a disciplinary meeting to discuss his trend of behavior and to outline clear expectations and also give him a chance to speak on how we can address anything that isn't working in the workplace. He reveals he has deep-seated depression and tells us, to my recollection, "If I didn't take those sick days off, I swear I would have come into work and gone postal on each and every one of you." His union rep immediately took him outside. We regrouped and ended the meeting early. A few days early, an investigation is launched on his threat. Days into the investigation, he announces his retirement. Story 29. Not an HR person, but I know this story well because it spread through the company like wildfire. I work at a distribution center which houses a store that sells our product, a warehouse which ships the products out, and the corporate office all in one building. A warehouse driver, who was mildly annoying with his know-it-all attitude about sports, took time off, weeks at a time, sometimes up to a month, constantly for various things like the birth of his daughter being sick, field trips at school with his daughter, etc. Mostly it was taking time off because his daughter had a condition that caused her to need constant attention. The guy's wife wound up pass. A bunch of people from the company showed up at the viewing. The daughter wasn't there, which would be understandable, but there were 0 pictures of this daughter anywhere, and 0 mention of this woman having a daughter. After a while, my coworkers who went to the viewing started to whisper amongst themselves about where the hell the daughter was, and came back to work the next day and talked about how bizarre it was. It got all the way up to the manager of the warehouse, and after the guy's bereavement period was up, the manager called him into the office and asked him point blank if he actually had a daughter, and the guy confessed. Got fired. I sort of felt bad for the guy because I think his wife did have legitimate health issues, but I have no idea why he needed to lie about having a child. Story 30. Not HR, but this was just a rumor around the company, so there's no knowing if it's true or not. I used to work at a GameStop for a couple years as a part-time, not store manager. Every year around fall, I believe. They hold a conference where the store managers would all get flown out to a city where the conference was being held for a week. It was a good time. There were presentations, giveaways, game trailers, etc. On more than a few occasions, the conference was held in Las Vegas. In Las Vegas, you probably know that escort is legal. GameStop as a company is aware of this, and while they're okay with their employees drinking and gambling off the clock, they made it very well know that while you are on conference, you are a representation of our company. Therefore, you are not allowed to hire escorts. Yada, yada, yada. In situations like this, companies are totally allowed to terminate at their discretion, so this isn't illegal or anything. Well, apparently, there was this one store manager who didn't really care. I mean, I'm sure there were plenty who didn't care. But this poor git goes to bring his escort up to his hotel room. And when the elevator opens, the president of company of the time was inside. I guess he immediately knew what was up. I assume by the clothing on each person involved, and fired him on the spot. Presumably, he was still there for the rest of the conference and was able to take his normal flight home. This could very well be a GameStop urban legend, though. Story 31. I'm not in HAR, but once was tasked with working on an assessment where we analyze network traffic logs for any indicators that the client may be compromised. We set up a query to return any traffic that indicated a workstation was connecting to the same server at least once every hour for 24 hours. The idea is to find a workstation with a backdoor on it that was beaconing to a command and control server. We didn't find any backdoors, but one employee was watching so much adult film on his workstation. He set off the query, which is to say, he was hitting adult sites at least once an hour for 24 hours. My best guess was that he left an adult sites tab open on his workstation while he was working and left his workstation on during the work week. He was a remote employee connecting over VPN. We brought it up to the client, and they decided it was not an issue since they were only concerned with finding indicators of compromise. I doubt anything happened to him either since he was remote anyway. Also, his taste in adult film was bad, and it would have probably been awkward to bring it up. Story 32. Not my story, but one of an old buddy. He was the manager of a Pizza Hut in the 90s. They had big account each day during the week for a school. They were required to have the deliver by there at a certain time, before lunch. And if they did not deliver, they would not only call his boss, but call his boss's boss, and basically they would chew him out. So now knowing the premise of the story, one day he came in early for his shift, and normally another guy comes in. We can call him John. He was a dough kneader. So my friend came in and yelled out his name, "Hey, John!" No response. So he was like, he probably can't hear me, so he enters the room and John is on the kneading table with his pants around his ankles doing the dough. You can say he was pretty serious with his kneading. Anyways, he tells him to get out, throws all the dough away and starting making a batch as fast as he can. He ends up getting the pizzas late to the school. And his boss and boss's boss got called in and basically said what the heck happened. He was like, come to the back room and explains everything. They were like, okay, we won't talk about this. My friend always tells me he wonders how long this has been going on as John was there for 5+ years and the dough handler. Story 33. Worked at a grocery store where our manager walked in on a girl in the produce freezer using a cucumber as a sex play toy. I'm sure that was an awkward experience for Hijar. Still wonder to this day if she got caught during her first time. If not, what was she doing with the cucumbers afterward? Putting them back on the shelf? Story 34. The dude that got caught whacking it into female coworkers' shoes. This was downtown Chicago in the winter, and it was pretty common for women to keep a pair or two of dress shoes in a desk drawer or underneath their desks, and then wear sneakers or snow boots for the walk outside. Apparently, Shugu guy, Edgy G, would stay late and wait until all the other employees were gone. Then he'd find a shoe he liked and go to town. The way he got caught is as bizarre as the act itself. Another employee had decided to stop in late one evening and surprised Sog while he was in the break room cleaning out the insole of a shoe he had just, graced with his presence. SGG was unable to give a reasonable explanation for why he was providing this strange public service, shoe cleaning not being on the list of perks available to employees of that firm. So he bolted, leaving soiled shoe and damp paper towel behind. The next day, he came into work, confessed to a love of strappy pumps and stiletto heels, admitted to expressing his affection in a very intimate and inappropriate fashion, and was then escorted out the door carrying a sad cardboard box containing his personal effects. That would have been the end of the story, except that a memo was quickly and quietly distributed to all female employees explaining that they might want to stick to their street shoes. Well, wait, that's bad phrasing. Explaining that they might want to keep wearing their street shoes that day and promising that they would receive a check to cover the replacement cost of any shoes they had ever kept overnight in the office. I'm not saying any of the ladies abused the company's generosity, but there was a lot of really expensive designer footwear walking around the office over the next couple of weeks. Story 35. An employee was supposed to be sending old hard drives to a third-party company to be destroyed, something like that. Instead, he was selling them on eBay. When we confronted him, he admitted to it and then said, "But if I'm going down, I'm bringing this whole place with me." He proceeded to provide me a list of names of people who were doing substances in the office and having sex in the network closet, amongst other places. Story 36. Not HR, but a couple of employees were sent out for a training to corporate HQ. One male, one female. They took the same flight and took a taxi to go to the hotel from the airport. On the way, the guy decided to flirt, and when that did not get him a positive response, tried to grab the female employee. He was let go after a very short investigation with the taxi driver as the witness for both corporate and the subsequent criminal case. Story 37. One where the person didn't get fired for certain reasons. I worked at Stop and Shop in high school. There was a kid with Down syndrome who did bagging and cart return at the store. He was very obviously disabled, but he also clearly knew he could get away with things as a result. One time he was bagging, and a woman was going through the line. He very clearly said, "Junk, pussy, junk in you," directed towards the woman. The cashier manager walked him off the floor and had a talk with him. I witnessed this incident and talked to some of my coworkers about it. Apparently, he did stuff like this frequently with female customers. He would make sexual comments. I know he had a disability, but honestly, I don't think he should have been in a position like that. Story 38. Obligatory not har but tag. I've told this story before because it had legitimately messed me up. This was about 15 years ago. I was in the military and my sub has just returned from a long deployment a few days before. I was standing a security watch from 0000 0400, and they posted this FNG as my under instruction helper. It's like on the job training. You don't get qualified for stuff unless you have a certain amount of UI watches under your belt. Guy was unremarkable. Seemed like an eager kid that had no idea what he was getting into. Fast forward a year. Due to a medical condition, I'm not on temporary shore duty. I meet up with some friends from the boat to catch up, and they start to tell me about that guy. He's now in the pretrial confinement facility. That means one thing, courts-martial. I asked what happened. The boat get a call from local law enforcement. They got a report of a loud party at a motel. When the cops go in, they find the guy and two sophomores. High school sophomores. The captain orders an investigation. The guy's roommate is a sonar tech that I knew. He said he was asked if he saw anything weird. He tells them that he had noticed his stuff going missing. So he set a webcam to record the room. He say one day he checked it and that the guy comes in, strips naked, puts in a DVD and starts to beat meat. Then when he finished, he cleaned it off his hand with his tongue. What messed me up? He was watching Harry Potter. The investigation turned up more stuff on his computer. First time I ever felt sorry for a lieutenant junior grade. He had watch and catalog it for the trial. Story 39. We once had an IT employee who we fired for general negligence, failure to show up to work, and various other work-related problems. How do you know when a pilot walks into the room? He tells you. That was this guy, and we've always referred to him as the pilot from then on. The guy was so incredibly in love with himself that it just made you hate him. His claim to fame around the office was that someone found his profile, and that pretty much summed him up. He had a reputation in bar circles for being a creepy scumbag, and was in the process of getting a divorce and having his young daughter taken away from him. He'd been disowned by his fairly wealthy family, and his wife had left him. He'd skip out on work to go to his court dates and then lie on his timesheets. So he wouldn't lose his pay. The customers hated him and complained about him constantly. None of our own staff liked him, but we kept him around because at the time he was our only certified Mac expert, although I use that term loosely. One time he phoned in sick because he didn't have enough money to buy gas, and returned the following day, payday, and immediately began showing off the crazy back tattoo he had gotten that week. Finally, we got sick of him and fired his ass. 2 weeks later, I got a sheepish phone call from one of my junior techs. The customer he was at was fuming made because they had discovered that this guy had gone to every single Mac in the building, several dozen, and had used the webcams to take a picture of his own face and slapped it onto the login screen under our company's name to remind everyone that he was their E8 guy. They demanded angrily that we remove this immediate, and I instructed our tech to just do it and spend however much time it took, all the while laughing hysterically. I went upstairs and explained this to our HR lady, and she responded, "Some people I wish I could fire twice." Story 40. I'm a HR assistant at a call center. I'm also the highest ranked man in the department. Because of that, I often get given the bad guy or disciplination roles, handing out warning letters, settling disputes, and stuff like that. Anywho, we had this female agent, let's call her Kim, come to me and one of the other female assistants crying, saying that she had been harassed by one of the male agents, let's call him Mike, and bullied by another female agent, let's call her Kate. We thought it was strange that two separate agents on different teams would be coming after a third in a different team. So here is what it turned put to be. Mike had taken an interest in Kim after seeing her in the canteen during breaks and wanted to go out with her. Our company is fine with relationships as long as you let us know. Kim rejects him as she claims she heard he had a girlfriend and also he just isn't her type. That's when the bullying from Kate starts, who is, as it turns out, is Mike's secret finance. So for the next 3 weeks, Mike harasses Kim to go out with him, and Kate bullies her for weirdly also not going out with Mike and calling her stuck up and things like that. We ended up bringing them in explaining why what they did was unacceptable. And at the end, we had to even call the police on Mike due to the severity of the harassment. The weirdest thing is both of them acted as if they hadn't done anything wrong and that Kim should have just recognized how great a guy Mike is. They only apologized for not letting the company know they were engaged, though Kate said it should have been fine since it happened before they joined. Story 41. At the head office of one of the UK's big retailers a few years back. Temp receptionist, first day, starts off putting out call announcements and such, sounding a little nervous and stumbling. As the day goes on, the announcements are getting worse, stumbling over words, sounding confused. People laughed politely to themselves at the poor girl struggling with her first day. At the end of the day, she leaves, gets into her car, and weaves out of the car park like a cross-eyed badger before giving a good tap to another colleague's car. Basically, she had a water bottle on her desk all day filled with vodka and had been getting more and more pissed as the day went along. Before deciding to get in her car and try to drive home, she appeared to have no intention of stopping when she hit the car, and it was only the fact she was so unable to get the car out of the car park that enabled someone to stop her. Story 42. Not HR, but was a middle manager in government organization, and the new guy showed up late and hungover on the first day. And by showed up, I mean someone knocked on his front door and asked if he was coming in. His daily performance decreased from that point, but senior management was too worried about legal repercussions to fire him. Also, apparently, he was still learning the limits of acceptable behavior. So it was okay. Every 2 weeks, for the 3 or 4 days after payday, he'd show up late, hungover, and sometimes smelling like weed, then doesn't have enough money for groceries and mooches smokes for the next 10 days. I recommend he gets fired, still not fired. After months of this, he got arrested for assault. Turns out he was a massive alcoholic. Surprise. And his wife didn't like that. When she took away his booze, he beat her bad enough to fracture vertebrae in her neck. Still not fired. Charges were dropped because his wife was as foolish as my boss. When he got back to work, he was a little embarrassed and sheepish for maybe a week. Then comes in on a Monday still clearly high. My boss has a revelation and send him on paid rehab. When he finally got back to work, he wasn't any better. Just guidey and a bad worker with no work ethic. He eventually got fired for stealing from the supply room. So, I guess that's worse than alcoholism, substances at work, and wife abuse. Oh, one time he also checked into a hotel across the road from me so he could drink without his wife nagging him. Then decided he wanted to hit himself, so he called my boss over to talk him out of it. Boss sends me, instead of calling the ambulance or police for some reason. Of course I call the police, then go over and visit. I'm not staying. I fully trust his judgment, but still, I had to leave a half-cooked beef braised to spoil. Damn you, Kevin. Story 43. I feel like this sort of fits here. I work at a privately owned 3-star hotel in Canada. We were having a really hard time finding someone to work nights, and I ended up working, or at least coming in for an hour to do audit, and then someone else taking over the rest of the shift. For like 21 days in a row. Eventually, we found someone who wanted to do nights, and they were basically hired on the spot. Turns out, she sucked at her job. She couldn't do audit, even though she claimed to have accounting background and night audits are ridiculously easy to do. She was rude to coworkers and guests. We had multiple complaints about her. And she called in sick at least twice a week. She was fired because she just overall sucked at her job. However, she was given the option of finishing the rest of her schedule. She didn't show up to any of her shifts, which we kind of expected and planned for. The time came when she came in to pick up her last paycheck. She freaked out on my coworker because she didn't get paid for the 3 days she never showed up to. She then drove to my manager's house. My manager is on maternity leave right now, broke in, and tried to kidnap my manager's baby, until my manager made sure that she got paid the right amount. She got arrested. Story 44. Not HR. I worked at a small financial services firm, 5 people, that officed with a much larger firm, around 150 people. Each year, the larger firm invites my team to their annual Christmas party. My boss says one thing to us: don't embarrass us. Most of my colleagues have young children or have long commutes or both. So by 11 o'clock, the only person left from my firm is our new hire. He gets blitzed, gropes the very attractive receptionist of the larger firm, and is told to leave. He then exits the party and jumps on the very expensive car of the larger firm's CEO with the CEO still in the car. Our protagonist is loaded into a cab. 2 or 3 minutes later, the cab driver returns to the party with our hero because he is so drunk he can't remember where he lives. Someone from the HR department of the larger firm then takes the inebriate in the cab and goes with him to our shared offices to look up his address. I show up to the office the next day not knowing any of this. No one from the larger firm will talk to me or look at me in the eye. New hire saunters in sometime around 10:30 a.m. He said he couldn't remember the previous night and asked if he did anything stupid. Upon seeing the new hire enter, my boss runs up, grabs him by the arm, takes him into a side office. Several minutes later, my angry boss and the now ashen-faced coworker exit. I never see the kid again. It takes me several weeks to get the full story from friends in the larger firm.